Well, blessings, everybody. Welcome back to Acts Part 2, lesson number 7, video number 2. Did you catch the mistakes in the last video? Did you? Sometimes when you do these things, you make little typos, you do things. I think I had the wrong chapter on the cover page right here. And I'm not sure, I didn't go back and check it, but I think I did. I put down a Festus rather than Felix. Have you gotten confused with that? Because you have Felix, then you have Festus, then you have Agrippa, right? So easy to do that. So easy to mistype it, and particularly in the local classes when we were doing it, I told them, y'all will have to forgive me because I will say Felix when I meant Festus, and everybody sort of does that. So it just gives us some real awareness that we have to pay real close attention. So here we are. Paul is now before Festus, right? Well, Festus has come to power, come the governor, and he goes to Jerusalem. We're not told why he goes there, but apparently I suspect he goes just to show him I'm the guy in charge, right? He gets there and immediately he hears the charges against Paul. Now, Paul had been 2 years up in Caesarea, and apparently nothing was going to happen. Remember, because Felix just wanted money to get him out. And so the second a new ruler comes along, the Jewish leadership jumps on the opportunity and they bring these charges against Paul. Well, Festus made the Jews go to Caesarea, okay, to bring these charges before him, but they couldn't prove the charges. What they really wanted to do is they wanted Paul to come to Jerusalem because they were planning on killing him on the way there. So again, what was Paul's response? What was Paul's defense? He says, I hadn't offended the law in any way. You cannot prove these charges that they're bringing here. But Festus wanted to please the Jews. And the question came in class is a great question, which we can't get into detail right here. But why were both of these Roman governors, why did they want to please the Jews? Well, the immediate answer is because the leadership of the Jews and the Roman governors were working hand in glove just to keep the peace upon the land. Okay, the Jews were corrupt. They were being bought out by the Roman government just to keep the populace under control. That's the short answer. But then there's some bigger answers that you actually find in the Old Testament as to promises that the Lord made to his people. He said, if you will do these things and do this type of thing, I will give you power and authority, basically that will impact the whole world. And we're actually living in some of those days right now, the things that are happening. And so we'll talk about that some other time. But Festus wanted to please the Jews. So he asked Paul if Paul would go to Jerusalem. You know, here he is, Paul's in prison under his authority, and he asked him if he would go because he knew that it was wrong to do that. He knew he had no authority. He knew Paul was a Roman citizen. So what he was doing, he's basically saying, well, Paul is foolish enough to go ahead and say, yeah, I'll go. Then let his blood be upon his own hand. So what did Paul say? He says, I'm not going to do that. I am where I belong. I'm before a Roman tribunal right here. This is where I belong, not down there because I haven't done anything against their law. Haven't done anything against your law. And so you need to determine what to do. And then Paul said this, I appeal to Caesar. In other words, nothing's going to happen here. I've been long enough. I appeal to Caesar. Well, then Festus had a problem. He didn't have an indictment. There were no charges. He couldn't find anything. Well, King Herod Agrippa comes to town with his sister Bernice. Now, this is sort of interesting because his sister Bernice also had another sister, which means that would have been his sister, Drusilla, which was the wife of Felix. Remember, we saw her. And it's believed historically, from history, that Agrippa had an incestuous relationship with his sister Bernice. So it gets really interesting, right? Well, Herod Agrippa wanted to hear Paul. And Festus had brought these things up and says, well, that's great. So they gather this big thing. Remember how it said there in the scripture, it said with great pomp that they had the commanders and the powerful people in the city and Festus and Agrippa. And they all gathered together to listen to Paul. And Festus very forthrightly comes out and says, I want y'all all to give input into this. I want to hear what you think. I think the idea behind this, and he actually told Agrippa, seems sort of foolish to me to send him and let him appeal to Caesar. And when he gets to Caesar, for there to be no charges. In other words, this is going to reflect very negatively upon me. And so he was trying to diffuse the problem here among himself, among Herod, among the other leaders here. And so next time we gather together, we'll see what Paul had to say. Y'all keep pressing on. Bye-bye.